begin. Let me just introduce our panel to you. As I said, my name is Rishi. Also, there is Aerobridge community lead Vibhu Tripathi, who you can see. And then we have three very my friends and colleagues, you can say. The first one being Siddharth Purohit, who of course a lot of you would know, who is the maintainer at Autopilot. Siddharth Chetty, who you may know from his work, a lot of work and efforts that he puts in iSpirit. And of course, Biswajit Day from Drone Helpline. And we are here to talk about open source technologies for drones, building a local ecosystem, and no one better to do that than Siddharth Chetty. He's going to talk to us about the background for this, and then we will get into the technical side. This will be a little bit technical webinar for some of you, and it is meant to be like that. We are a group of engineers who are building a digital implementation in the open source. Be ready for that. And of course, with Siddharth and others, you will have Biswajit and others, you will have a huge knowledge about sort of the questions and the practical aspects of the policy and so on. So let's just begin. Having said that, I'm just going to hand it over to Siddharth, who will just sort of kick our proceedings here.
Thank you so much, Rishi, for giving me a chance to participate in this discussion today. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel along with Vibhu, Biswajit, and a fellow Siddharth as well. At one point in time in the Digital Sky team, there were 4 or 5 Siddharths. So it's good fun to be here. Hey everyone, I'm a volunteer with the iSpirit Foundation. iSpirit is a non-profit technology think tank focused on building out digital public infrastructure in India. So we take a long-term view, a 20 to 30-year view of problems. And the 3 problem areas that we've been looking at societally are: 1, financial inclusion, particularly democratizing credit; 2, health inclusion; and the 3rd is logistics. And that's particularly the area within which Digital Sky becomes a key part. You may be familiar with some of the work in the area. On the financial inclusion side, it's resulted in the creation of something called the India Stack, which are these digital building blocks, including Aadhaar, UPI, DigiLocker, eSign, eKYC, the data empowerment and protection architecture, all of which are really meant to come together to democratize credit at scale for small businesses and individuals in the country. And the real innovation architecture behind all of these platforms is very simple. Our view is that India's hard problems will be solved by a jugalbandi between public infrastructure at the base and private innovation on top. And this is not new. So if you go back to the Valley, that's a story of a lot of technology development that's come out from there. So you and I are using, let's say, when you access the internet, you're using a browser. The browser is based on the back of HTTP. The browser is a private innovation on top of public infrastructure, which are those HTTP open standards, right? Or when we are connecting over some of these online calls, all of that is happening on the back of SIP, which is again public infrastructure, open standards that was put out by the community. So we shouldn't forget that a lot of innovation that we see around us, although the narrative is that it's all happening within private innovators, a lot of the innovation is actually happening between this jugalbandi, public infra at the base, which may take the form of open standards, it may take the form of public research. You and I may use Google Maps. Google Maps is built on the back of a US government-funded public good, which is the GPS satellites, right? So therefore, this combination becomes very key. And for a large part in India, we've ignored that. And we've not had institutions anchor that long-term view. And therefore, we've often been caught up in a very short-term, what do we do now? We're running late. What do we do next year? And some of these problems cannot be solved. Some of these hard problems do require 20, 30-year horizon. And that's really what, iSpirit and a set of us as volunteers have been working on. And on the logistics side, this journey started a couple of years back. Drones were banned in India, unfortunately. And at that point in time, A set of volunteers came together. Tanuj, Siddharth Purohit was also part of the early volunteer team, and a bunch of others, essentially saying, how can we unlock the current system? There's a ban in place. There's a very restrictive policy coming in. And how do we really allow for civilian? There are two priorities, right? The first priority is, how do you allow for civilian operations of drones at scale? How do we integrate drones into civilian airspace? And what are the policy building blocks and technology building blocks that would make that happen in a way that's contextual to India? Because we have very different security profiles and risk constraints than other parts of the world. And then the second is, of course, how do you then, from a non-civilian perspective, when you take the lens of national security, especially given the countries that we're surrounded by our borders, how do you develop a lot of this technology within India, which is a much longer term view? We cannot do it over the next year or 2 years or 5 years. If at all we'll be able to succeed, it's only if we manage to do this over a 20, 25-year timeline. And that's how long it takes. And so those were the two kind of genesis pillars with which we started looking at this effort, which then came to be known as Digital Sky. The idea early on was, could we make a lot of the enforcement concerns that they had implementable using technology? So that unlocks the sector. And that's how the genesis behind NPNT was born. Really, could you shift from having to trust the operator, trust the human beings, towards trust in code that's taking place at the firmware level? And that's how the whole architecture behind the registered flight module, which became this trusted store of a drone's identity, of a drone's permission, and other activities, flight logs related to that. And could you use that as a proactive enforcement mechanism? So that kind of, in some sense, became a Trojan horse within the ecosystem, which also allowed us to get the first version of the policy out. Of course, since then, we've had a lot of issues when it comes to operationalizations for many reasons, right? And so the ecosystem is now in its next phase. Some of you may have seen the recently published, a fairly liberalized drone rules, draft drone rules of 21. And the intent is for us to focus on just ensuring that the current operations that are happening in India are happening in a manner that have legal sanctity, right? So most of us are all good actors, right? And one of the biggest mistakes that happen within the system is when you design a system for bad actors, but those are two different systems. Digital Sky is attempted to be a system for good actors, for safe operations, and you need to counter bad actors differently, and that's where your rogue and anti-drone technologies come in. And so therefore, it's really exciting to see the work that's gone into the open source movement so far, and actually building out this reference implementation, and hopefully it's one of many. But I think that's very pivotal, because for a lot of people that want to participate in this ecosystem, this was otherwise a significant barrier to entry. And to see a bunch of developers coming together, building out their open source implementation, giving it away, is extremely, extremely special. And I think this is just the start. If you think of it, that open source implementation has got all of us together in the room, but there are many more hard problems in front of us. You're talking about, how do you think about, once these new drone rules go on to get passed, how do you actually think about UTM in this space? How do you think about various sorts of dynamic zoning, permissioning? How do you even think about countering? You've seen the recent attacks that happened in Kashmir. So in a separate system, how do we even address some of those? And I think this community that's been built up, and which Rishi has been anchoring really well, is, I think, absolutely phenomenal, because some of these hard problems, although this is just the first step, the very small baby step that we've taken together, I think a lot of these hard problems will need us to now push ourselves to those limits. And I think it can be solved. We've proved that if we think from first principles, we can go ahead and build one of the world's largest identity systems, which most people thought was impossible. We can completely re-engineer payment systems. Today, UPI is the world's fastest growing payment system. We are ahead of China and the US. In fact, India's fintech industry is probably 5 to probably 8 years ahead of US's fintech industry. So it is possible, but that will only happen if we keep this experimentation spirit going. We go back to first principles. If all we do is we just copy, because someone else has done it in the world, of course, if it's relevant, then you should copy by all means. But if it's not, And we'll only be able to differentiate if we can go back to first principles and think about this. And mistakes will happen, but we learn from that. And therefore, this community becomes an anchor for some of that tacit knowledge, right? It reminds me, I was telling Rishi the other day, of the Homebrew Computer Club. Because if you go back in time, what all of us are using started its genesis as a bunch of hobbyists who would meet every other weekend. And out of that became one of the most valuable companies. And that's the history of any technology. I think in the Indian ecosystem, we don't respect hobbyists and a lot of the experimenters in the early days as much as we should. But I think it's great to see that changing going forward. And out of this, I think, of course, the open source NPNT implementation is probably the first step of many more steps and challenges that this community can take on. So super excited to be here and be a part of the session. And back to you, Rishi.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sid, for this sort of introduction. This is just the beginning, as sort of you mentioned. I know for some of you, Aerobridge is new. So what I would recommend is go to aerobridge.in. And then there is a form to fill out for joining the Slack channel. So there is a Slack channel, which we will talk about down the line, but that is the way to sort of engage. There is a 70, 75, 80 people now in the Slack channel, and you can come and welcome to sort of contribute and just build this together. With that, we just get into the meat of it. I'm sort of very happy to introduce my friend and colleague who has been working with me and the community in Aerobridge for the past number of months. And of course, his involvement in Autopilot dates way before that, Siddharth Purohit, and he wants to share some of the latest as far as some of that work is concerned. So I'm sure everyone is excited to see and listen and hear Siddharth, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rishi. So today I'm going to do a brief demo about how to actually, get Autopilot tested through the QCI test tool that we've got. So let me share the screen. Okay, so are you guys able to see my screen now, I think? Okay, good. So let's talk about, so I think Autopilot, if people are not aware, is basically the autopilot system, the open source flight stack, basically, which allows people to build, control the drone that you have built. And in India, most of the users who are using or building drones are more than likely to use this flight stack, right? So this basically demo is towards how we have got the NPNT, the no permission, no takeoff implementation as part of the Autopilot flight stack. So we have got this simulation feature in Autopilot, which allows people to basically run the flight stack in your computer rather than an actual hardware. So when you're developing and testing stuff, it is very crucial that you are able to do this in a controlled, in an environment where you don't have to literally take your drone and move out and in and out of place to get the permission tested. But the firmware or the software is running on both your Cube Orange, your Autopilot hardware, and the computer, in this case, a Linux machine, is exactly the same. It's going through all the right paths, same paths, and you are going to get the same results. That is one of the beauty of the system. So what we have got here is this command line command that I'm going to explain what it means so that you guys are aware. So this is sim vehicle script inside Autopilot project, which allows you to launch the Autopilot CITL instance. And we want it to be launched as a copter vehicle. And this is the key thing that we are passing here is the public key of the digital sky environment, which I extracted from the XML file that is provided. So all the permission artifacts that you have got, right? So if you want to look at a permission artifact, this is what it looks like. I mean, it's gibberish, but if you look deeply into it, we have got this X509 certificate, right, which contains the public key of the, of the QCI tool in this case, or in the future, that will be the Digital Sky instances certificate. So from this, one can extract the public key, or it will be provided in the future by the Digital Sky instance itself. And that is what we built as a part of the ArduPilot flight stack, so that when you are doing the verification, when you're doing the signing verification of this artifact, you are able to know that this is actually a valid artifact, right? And then we have got this location, which is test npnt. In this case, it's just my home location. And then we have just got a dash map, which will launch a map view here. And dash debug is simply to allow us to launch GDB or any sort of debugger tool you want to attach to this particular executable of the flight stack, right? So let's run this tool. So here we have this compilation going, and once that's finished, it will auto launch your map, and the ArduPilot is connected to the MAV proxy. So MAV proxy is another, it is like ground control station, but in this kind of format, it's more like a ground control station for sort of developers and people who wants to tinker and develop. It pretty much provides all the tools that are provided by GCS, but it's a command line executable. So you have to, use it as a command line tool like you would on a Linux box. So it has all the commands that you want. For instance, if you want to, if you want to switch to a different mode, you can do that. So it will be switching to, guided mode in this case. Right. So this drone is now showing up in my location. And now we want to do is generate a test case from the NPNT tool, right, which is a test tool for people to try and test if their drone is actually NPNT compliant or not. So in this case, we are going to try and generate the test case. So in this, we want a drone ID. So for instance, in this proxy, we can make modules which allow us to, customize some tools and features, so as to in this case, I have implemented a Digital Sky module, which will allow us to get some parameters to fill this particular form. So we want Digital Sky, get drone ID. So this is the drone ID. We copy this to here, and then we have to make it, and the model we can just type it as frame. And now we want to upload the KML file. In this case, I have created the KML file using Google Earth, and you can go and just plot a polygon of some shape around your home location that you want to use, and use that as generate a KML file, and you can just upload it here. So I've got that done. I'm just going to upload that KML file, which I already done beforehand. You can just use the Google Earth tool for that. And the PEM file is basically requesting us to upload a public key that we are going to use, the private key of which we are going to use to sign our logs, right? So every log should be signed with some sort of, RSA 2048 private key. So we are going to upload the public key part of that. So this is I generated locally on the machine. But more than likely, it's either going to be something that is going to be done by the management server, or you are going to use a certificate tool or something like that to sign your logs. So in this case, I just generated it, or it can even be done on the hardware itself, which I have not added the feature yet. It is done and implemented, but I have not added this to project. Only for the reason I'm just waiting for the confirmation from the policy side that they indeed are going to require a signing on the hardware itself, which it seems like is not likely to happen with the liberalization that is already been going on. So I have just kept that out of this kind of demo and implementation for now. So let's upload this test public PEM file, and then we just add it. Oh, seems like the website is crashed or something. Okay. Anyways, guess we'll have to do it again.
Maybe it just timed out.
Yeah. Go with the camel file, the PEM file. Got this done. Okay, so this will generate a test case for us, and this test case will just contain, the permission artifacts, various permission artifacts that we need to run through our, our flight stack to test if it works or not. So just get those unzipped here. That be this one. Okay, extracted. Okay, so now we copy these permission artifacts one by one and test what the results are, so that we know our flight stack is behaving or not per NPNT guidelines. So we have got this permission artifact here. Yeah, so one more thing we need to do is we need to set these two parameters. One is UIN and operator ID. Again, by default, it will be done automatically in your case by GCS development or management server level connection. But for now, we are just going to manually set that using the same digital sky module. Use set params command, do the UIN first, and then operator ID. Right. So see if it is actually set or not. We do get params, and we can kind of see, yeah, set. Okay. So next step is we try to just harm the drone, see if it works or not. So that means this is a valid permission artifact. We go to upload log, and the answer to first artifact is yes, it's a valid permission. Okay. Next, we try the second permission artifact. See if that works. Again. Okay, so this one says horizontal fence breached, which means that it is outside of geo limit. Try the third one. And same again. This time it's the bad operator ID. So again, no. We've got bad operator ID here. And then the fourth one. So there are total 6 tests that we have to run. And then there will be a breach artifact that we have to run through and generate logs from. So this one has bad drone ID. So this is again no. It's got bad drone ID. So that's a fail. Then we have a fifth one. That is outside of the time that is allowed. So again, no, bad time limit. So this is basically running through all the potential fails that we should be showing in case of a bad permission artifact or a permission artifact used outside of the limits, basically. So in this case, is unable to load a permission artifact. So the error code is -3, which inside the libnpnd tool is basically in our code, means that it's a bad signature. So the answer here is no. And this time it's a bad signature. So bad signature means in every artifact, we try to verify it against the QCI tools public key, and we found that it is actually not matching, right? So it should show that it's a bad signature in this particular case, right? So now we have to generate logs. For that, we have to copy a permission artifact called permission artifact breach.xml, right? So as you can see, I'm just copying it to the ArduPilot root directory in this particular case, because we are running our firmware/software from the same directory. And this is a CTL instance. Again, this is running on my machine. This is not running on the hardware. if it was running on a hardware, you would most likely use something called FTP tool. So FTP has a lot of tools like FTP list, get, put, in this MAU proxy. And if you're using Mission Planner, you have got a directory view, proper directory view in there. You can use it to upload permission artifact using that tool. If you have got your own GCS implemented, you can use, again, the same APIs that is provided via Mauling to upload files like XML files or whatever you want to using this tool. And ArduPilot Flystack will automatically read this file name called permission artifact.xml and find that, test it through the commands when you are passing the ARM throttle and do npnt test on them. Fine. So now we have got this permission artifact. We want to generate 4 logs here. I'm not going to do the 4th one because it requires us waiting 30 minutes because that's when the time runs out. But I'm going to do the first 3 and we'll just use some random log to just upload it here. So the first log requires us to just arm and disarm, and there is no breach required here. The second log is to check if we are doing log chaining, meaning the second log should contain a valid hash of the first log, right? The hash type there required is SHA-256. So SHA-256 is required. So second log will be verified if it is a valid log or not. Then we have got Geofence Switch, where we are required to move the drone outside of the set zone that we set in the KML file. And the time limit is basically, if you are operating outside of time limit, it should do a log and, show the result to you. So let's do the no breach log first. So first we should probably remove all the logs we have got here so that we don't create a, bad. Right. Anyways, so we have got no npnt log here. The first one. So as you can see, it creates a log file like this. And sorry, I've got some random lines here from someone.
Yeah, whoever is doing it, stop doing it, please.
Yeah. Anyways. Okay. So yeah, this basically is the log that is generated, and we can see, if you want to look at how it looks like, this is sort of the log file that is generated here. And so the first log is done. Now we have to do the second log again. We just arm, and it will disarm automatically after some time. So there's the second log. So we should be seeing now 2 logs now. These are the 2 logs here, right? Now we have to do a breach log. So I'll load a console for a module console for a better view of parameters of what's going on here, right? So what we want to do is fly outside of the zone and create a breach. So this is sort of the region that I have got inside the KML file. If we go out of it, it's going to cause a breach. So we are going to arm throttle, and then we want to take off to say 10 meters. And as you can see, it has armed and it is trying to take off here. And we want to direct drone to this location at altitude of 10 meters. And it will start navigating to that location. We should see the breach appearing in the last log here. So let's see. Right. So you can see the Geofence breach has started logging, and we just RTL from here. Wait for it to land. And once that's done, we basically sign those logs locally now. So there are 2 ways the signing would work. As I said, it can be done on the hardware itself or off the hardware. So right now I have implemented on the hardware signing, and we can include it back in again at later stage if required. But for now, our belief is that it's better to sign it on, outside of the hardware on management server. So basically the logs will be uploaded alongside user credential, and you have this logging signed on the management server and uploaded to the Digital Sky server. We believe that is a better approach rather than doing it on the hardware itself. But let's see how kind of policy decisions are done, and then we can make a call accordingly as required. Right, so it's almost down. Altitude is 1 meter. Should disarm anytime now. Yep. So we have all of our 3 log files now. It's time to sign them now. Let's see. So I've got a Python script to do that for us here again. This is for testing only. In real thing, this will most likely be done inside GCS tool, or sorry, on the management server or the hardware itself. So let's see, we have got this one signed, then do the second and the third one. Right, so we should have all the signed log files here. Now we just move them to proper name. So the first file was the valid one. So we call it, let's call it valid1.json. The second one will be the valid2.json, and we have got third one, which is a breach log here. We are going to just call that endpoint breach.json. Okay, so it's now time to upload these files. So we have the first log file right here, valid1. We have it valid2 is right there. The geofence breach. Is this one. And we'll just upload any random file because we're not going to wait for another 30 minutes. So this is going to be a fail because we don't have a valid time breach log, but still gives you an idea of how it's going to look like. So we upload it. Okay. And we can look at the log file now. Right. So this will generate immediately the log files that we want. And process the log files and the answers that we gave. So as you can see, the 6 tests, the arming tests we have passed as required, right? So it was, first one was the valid PA, the second one had the badge and operator ID and so on and so forth. And we have got the logging frequency well and done as well and good as well. Log schema is correct. So that matches. So that means all of our logs had the correct log schema. Except of course time breach log can contain any time breach. So the no breach log, the signature passed as expected, true, pass, log validation again passed, and so did the signature and log validation for geo breach. Time breach, as I said, will fail because we didn't give it a time breach log, but I can show you a log which passed entirely. And we can open that one. So this will show you that it has passed all the tests that are required. So I did that test previously. And it had the time breach correct log as well. So this basically is how, basically how you are supposed to use the test tool and validate that your implementation is a valid implementation. And QCI would be accepting to that. Another thing that can be helpful is looking at the log. Sometimes you want to know, well, what's failing? I don't know. So you can just look at inside the log and it will show you, well, in the time breach log file, I found geofence breach parameter, which was something not I was expecting, right? So that's why we got the bad entry type and failed the test for the time breach in our this particular case, right? So for others, there were no errors, hence this passed. But if there were errors, it would have shown it there, right? So this is basically currently existing as a PR to Arduino pilot projects. If someone wants to try it, one can just go to Arduino pilot project and find this tool inside. I expect this to go into the master, which means that it will be inside our main Arduino pilot tree about I would say in a month, less than a month even. And afterwards, to make it to a final release, I would give it another 6 months before it makes into the Arduino pilot main stable releases, so that people can just use it using downloading the firmware from the your mission planner or whatever. So you don't even have to compile it yourself. But for now, it exists as a pull request. You can just search Digital Sky here, and you should see this PR here. Right now, I have to update. So previously, I had the instructions for this along with the signing, which is no longer valid. So I need to update the documentation, which I would probably do it in a day or two. But the project is available here. You can download this, clone this, and try it out yourself. The structure of the project is basically we have created this new module called AP Security inside Arduino Pilot, and it kind of runs all the security related stuff and validation kind of stuff related to the Digital Sky. And I have also implemented a module called libnpnt, which has all the necessary tools, libraries, and details required to extract information from the permission artifact, right? So that particular library can be used with other projects as well. And this is particular implementation in this case was done with the Arduino Pilot, but the library can be used outside of this project as well. So that is kind of the structure of the project. If you do want more information on how to develop and use this tool, our Slack channel, I think I'm really available there. If you have queries, you can ping me there directly on our Aerobridge Slack channel, which Rishi and Vibhu would be introducing. And of course, if you find any bugs or issues, feel free to report them here. Help on documentation or any sort of help with regards to automating a lot of this stuff is also welcome. I mean, this would eventually be needed to be a part of a continuous integration system in the Arduino Pilot project as well. So we'll have to do an auto test on this. So basically be able to download the zip file and process it through the CI integration so that we are not breaking changes as we update the Arduino Pilot project itself is also a very useful thing to have. So these are the kind of key areas where support is welcome. And if you have any queries or anything, I think we have a separate time for that, I guess. Or if you have a message, you can leave it. I'll answer them as I receive them in the chat. Yep, I think that's all from my side. I will hand it over to you, Rishi, now.
Thank you. Thank you, Sid. Well, it's very exciting. This is in Arduino Pilot. It will be part of Arduino Pilot in the coming weeks and months. What I want to talk about is sort of the other side of this whole system. So this is a diagram. It is a little bit dated, but it helps in understanding where all of this fits. What Sid just demonstrated to you was this sort of interaction between the Digital Sky where you sort of download it and then use MAV proxy or something like that to communicate with the registered flight module. But now what we also have is what is known as the manufacturer's management server. And I'm going to introduce this to you. Some of you may know it already, but this idea that this whole signing and data storage and moving of files and so on away from the command line into this sort of a digital management server format. So this is the Aerobridge management server. So this is on GitHub as well. Basically, it is a Django server. If you're familiar with Python and Django, you can deploy it on your side. So you can use, for example, Google Cloud or AWS or whatever. I use Heroku, but anything that you would want. Basically, you can go over all of this. And if you're interested in sort of how to deploy it, you can deploy it on yourself. But here's what it looks like once you deploy it. All of this can be customized for your company. As I said to you, you just go download it and start customizing. We have this company called Bharat Drones, but you can sort of rename it to anything you want with your logo and so on. What Aerobridge helps you to do is to standardize your operations, whether you are a manufacturer or an operator of drones. So there are some differences between that. And then eventually also standardize all the operations with Digital Sky. Digital Sky is changing. The APIs don't really work at the moment, but basically once they are ready, we will be ready as well. I'm just going to show you very, very briefly all the things that you can do with this management server. Obviously, you start with the equipment. So let's say you can have an aircraft. For example, this is my drone. You can sort of have all the details as you would expect for your drone. I can say update the details and then sort of have all these specific details about it. You can also have, for example, details about the firmware that you might be interested in. Where is the binary file, public key, version number, your own manufacturing and a friendly name, maybe 1.2 release and so on. So you can store all of this as you go forward. From an operation point of view, you can have, for example, pilots. This is a test flight, so I'm not sure why this is not working, but basically you can have a sort of a list of people who are in your company. What are their certifications? How are they sort of using it and so on. And you can have basically different operators. Maybe you're doing inspection activities and so on. Then you have what you would call as plans and operations. You can start to in your GCS develop flight plans and so on, and then you can upload a copy of that into the management server. So, for example, this is a flight plan detail that is uploaded from the GCS into the management server. Then you can sort of request permissions to Digital Sky using the management server. So you create the operation in your GCS, Mission Planner or something like that, submit that to the management server, and the management server will automatically download the permission artifact for you for this operation, right? So you can do all of that automatically. So there is this notion of plans and operations. And then as Siddharth mentioned, you can also have this functionality to upload flight logs from the GCS into it. So this is sort of the user interface, as you may say, for the management server. It can do things like securely storing public and private keys. You can sort of have this, what you would call as a credentials manager. So if you have these private and public keys, clearly you shouldn't be storing them on your PCs and so on. So you can store them securely. You can do all the things that Digital Sky asks you to do, which is remember transaction history, see the Digital Sky's log and so on, flight permissions and so on. So you can do all of these operations as Digital Sky evolves through the management server as well. Now, there is also this functionality for uploading files and so on. Perhaps what is more interesting and what we're working on is this integration with Mission Planner. So this is the Aerobridge server API specification. And so obviously one way to interact with Aerobridge is via this, what you would call as a user interface. But basically, you can create a module in your GCS to say, here is the get command for all the flight plans, a post for creating a new flight plan, and so on. So once you host this server, or we host it for you, then you can use these APIs to interact with them without using the user interface. So there is a very elaborate, let's say, APIs that are being developed. They're well documented and constantly evolving, and there are test cases and so on. So essentially, you can start to sort of use the GCS directly to interact with Aerobridge. Of course, for some people, they might find this interface useful, but it doesn't really matter. You can use the GCS as well. Now, this is the Digital Sky public APIs that they have sort of published at the moment. They are a little bit incomplete, as you may sort of can imagine, but the idea here is that as they evolve, I hope which they evolve as fast as Aerobridge does, but we'll see, you will be compatible with these APIs. So we are always tracking this API, and essentially as they include all APIs, and the new policy mentions that they will have a sort of a very developed API. So we will basically include all of that. At the moment, what you get is full history for your records, flight plans, flight operations, integration with GCS, and sort of start doing your operations in a professional way, in a way that you can audit and track it. And all of this, as I said, is available to you. Now, the last thing that I wanted to share with you is this sort of sort of authentication or security about all of this. Now, basically, you can use things like Amazon Cognito or the Google tokens or whatever you want to. But for this case, we use another open source server that I have written, which is an OAuth provider for UTM, which is called Flight Passport, which has this JWT tokens and so on. So the point that I'm trying to say to you is that in addition to the management server, you also have a authorization and authentication piece, which keeps all of this secure. And the idea is that if you know how to do all of this, it is all open source and sort of you can do it. It's not rocket science, frankly. But then you have this option of either integrating it with Amazon AWS or that sort of system, or using something for your own. And then finally, as I said to you, this is a good diagram to understand where this is headed. Basically, Aerobridge will interact with Digital Sky to sort of download permission artifacts and so on. It can be used for the manufacturer to store public-private keys and so on, and operator to store flight plans, flight details, and so on. And then, as I said to you, we are looking for integration with Mission Planner, which is coming very shortly. So all these flight logs and all of that will be integrated right in Mission Planner and be made available to the community. And then all of what Siddharth had demonstrated will also be, let's say, fairly automatic from the Mission Planner side as well. So eventually, what you will see is that once you install Aerobridge on your side, or host it or somehow, we will integrate the whole stack. And the other thing that is interesting is that as the policy evolves, as Digital Sky evolves, we will evolve Aerobridge to make all of this, technologies available for anybody who wants to use it in the ecosystem. And so our hope is basically that as sort of the policy evolves, the digital capability, these building blocks will get more and more simpler and easy to deploy. Again, the best way to sort of contribute is join the Slack channel. If you are in know Python and Django and all of that, just jump in. If you don't, then my recommendation is learn Python. It can only be good for you from a job and career and all of that point of view. And just jump in. And as far as hosting is concerned, we have this sort of what we would call as a test flight instance, but and that's the best place to start playing with some of these things and sort of understanding what's going on. And then if you're really technically oriented, you can start to take a look at the server API so that you can integrate it with your GCS and so on. So yeah, all of this is available, and sort of I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to let Vibhu continue a little bit with introducing with the community and where we are headed.
Yep. Thank you so much, Rishi, and thank you so much, Sid, for those wonderful demonstration. I know a lot of people might be having a lot of questions because it was very a lot of information was basically thrown at us. So one thing I would recommend is I would ask everyone is to join the Slack channel. So the primary intent of Slack, the Slack channel, I'll actually share my screen. Yeah. So this is basically what the community that we are trying to build. The intent of this channel is not only NPNT or management server, but also the other aspects of drone certification, the QCI based drone certification as well. So we have a different channel as well called drone certification. You can ask questions related to anything. It can be the endurance testing or EMI EMC testings, and the objective here is only to we can, if we can help each other, the small manufacturers can help each other, then I think it will be very it would make much more easier for us to get our drone certified and you know uh, basically push make India a drone hub of the world. So, and of course we all understand the power of open source technology. I mean, I have always found it very fascinating back in my college when using Autopilot, which Sid talked about, and Sid has been an contributor since the last I think 6 or 7 years. So it's very fascinating without how, without worrying much about the controller, velocity controller or Kalman filter or any of those complicated algorithms, you can basically fly a drone, build a drone very simply. So yeah, that's the power of open source basically. And you don't using Aerobridge and the SIDS PR that will soon be merged, and you'll be able to do NPNT and all kind of stuff. It will definitely accelerate this whole ecosystem, and that this has been very much required since the past, and I'm glad that finally this is happening. Uh, I won't take much time. I think we are running out of time. So if you have any questions, you can drop in the chat. We'll take, Sid is here. He can take a few questions, and Rishi as well. I'll again ask Rishi to, talk a little bit about Rishi. We also have Biswajit on the call. We can talk about, the upcoming policy, what, you think how the changes could be, and how, we'll definitely adapt to those new changes. One thing that we are continuously hearing is, NPNT would be exempted for green zones, but of course it will be there for the other control airspaces, the red zones or the orange zones. So definitely NPNT would be required, and management server also, even in case of a green zones, I would assume there will be some sort of mechanism where people would basically people manufacturer would automatically generate permission artifact for the operators using the management server or something. So yeah, those things might come maybe in a few weeks. We'll see. Yeah, and over to you, Rishi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Vibhu. This is a community sort of an activity, and I would really recommend you just join and get involved and, just contribute to people who are trying to build the fundamental building blocks for this ecosystem. We have Biswajit and Sid Shetty with us. What maybe I would like to start with before we jump into the Q&A and conclusions. The bulk of the meeting was about this demo, so we are sort of covered with that. Maybe Biswajit first, and then Sid Shetty. Maybe just a comment on what do you think? First initial reactions, and then sort of what are your thoughts maybe each, if you can take a minute each, please.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks for, you can say, giving me a chance to be on the panel.
Please introduce yourself, Biswajit,
yeah.
please. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Myself, Biswajit, and I am representing Drone Helpline. Drone Helpline is a philanthropic initiative, and it started off with a motive of, you can say, just making the drone law, you can say, understandable for the normal drone users. Yes, being a manufacturer, we can understand, we can read the draft rules and regulations, we can read US rules, and we can understand it. Yeah, but yes, for a normal drone user, he has to understand it in a very simple way, the language he can understand. So we tried to simplify the drone rules, make it understandable for them, and even start off with a unique, you can say, initiative of getting some drone helpline number. It's like sort of world's first, you can say, helpline number where you can call, you can get your queries solved. So, okay, cutting short, I'll just give a reaction that I could give now for the Aerobridge thing. It's awesome. Aerobridge community has simplified the entire NPNT complications, or you can say confusions that we had being a manufacturer. If I wear the manufacturer's hat and if I look at Aerobridge, I will say that yes, now I'm confident that I can pass the QCI tests. I can go ahead with the NPNT norms that will get implemented in 6 months or one year time. As DC is not, you can say, specifically mentioned when they are going to implement it, but yes, it's a commendable job that Siddharth, Purohit, Rishi, Bibhu, and Siddharth from iSprit has been doing. Awesome. Like one-stop NPNT solution for everyone. And the best part is an open source. So if you have the, you can say, knowledge, technical know-how, you can use it as a base for developing your own GCS own NPNT drone. And if you don't have it, you can avail the services from the, you can say, committee members who can give it to you. So like, it's awesome. Yeah, over to you, Rishi.
Thank you. Thank you, Biswajit. Sid?
Absolutely. I think I second Biswajit. It's absolutely exciting to see both the open source version that can be implemented on the RFM side, as well as the device management setup. Both were key parts and often a key hurdle for a lot of folks that were attempting to adopt this infrastructure for a long while, over a year, 2 years now. And I think what's exciting is that out of this, there are clearly many other areas where there's a need for open source implementations beyond just the compliance elements, right? At the end of the day, this is hastening compliance, but that's just one piece of a larger picture of flying drones and building drones for civilian and defense purposes. And so if this community can go on to evolve and, like you guys cracked the NPNT problem, go on to crack some of the other core kernel issues that exist within UTM and some of the other elements as well, that would be very exciting going forward.
Yeah, this is I think this is the ambition anyways. I think that with Siddharth and how do you say, Siddharth and myself are the face of this, but really there are people I can give some shout outs, Mayank, Rhythm, Vibhu, Kapil, Dhwanit. There is a huge amount of people who do this work, who come and join the community every day. Think about what we're doing in let's say mid 2021. One of the most valuable things in the world is to have software development skills, and the fact that we are giving away this thing and not working for Google and whatever, all of us could work for any major company and earn 100 times what we are earning with this. So my request to the community and the people joining is to join in. And there is what you will find is that what you get out of what you give is way more. In addition to the technical side, friendships, relationships, and sort of this, how do you say, recognition as well for these contributions. Now, maybe, I don't know, Vibhu, I know this was sort of the bulk of our webinar, and so I'm happy to continue. And if you want to drop off, we can drop off. There will be a YouTube recording. But maybe we just start perhaps with Biswajit, and maybe briefly, Biswajit, comments about the upcoming regulations. And then I know Sid's very involved in it. So let me just sort of have Biswajit talk about it first, what you're hearing from the people who call on the helpline, and then maybe Sid, and where do you think the ecosystem is going, Biswajit?
Back in March 12, when the US Rule 2021 came out, like, yes, we received calls, we received mails, and in fact, like I'm just volunteering the Drone Helpline Initiative. I've got my own startup, Drone Stack Lab. So like we were stuck, like what is it? Now the initiative that you can say the DEC has come up with the Drone Rules 2021, the draft that they are going to implement, it has been liberalized to a great extent. They want drones to fly now. Okay, we can you can say taken the motor vehicle act sort of thing, like yes, first let the vehicles come on the road, let them run, and then we'll come up with all the you can say regulations, restrictions, or other you can say mandatory safety things that we need to comply. So now what we could understand from the drone draft rules 2021 is government wants the startups, the manufacturers to come up with drones. Of course, they have to pass it through QCI's, you can say stringent, you can say testing norms that they have set up. But yes, it's an open field now for everyone to come up and you can say fly with their drones.
Perfect. So you're optimistic about local manufacturing and local manufacturers in general?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Sid?
So I think, so it's obviously a significant administrative simplification since the previous version of the rules that were put out. And that's a big step forward. So a lot of, I would say, the sludgery around, or the sludge around applying, and the bureaucracy around that, and getting permissions and getting approvals, a lot of that has been taken out of the way. That being said, I think a lot more work needs to happen, especially around truly a couple of areas. I think one is recognizing the hobbyists and the R&D community, where a lot of the base developments for future technologies will take place. And that's very key. And we'll see those benefits not again in the here and now, but those are the benefits that pay off in the 5, 10, 15-year timelines. And making that as liberal as possible is a critical aspect. I think the second is, again, these are the stepping stone for larger BVLOS and autonomous operations. And I think the rules really need to set that stage. I don't think they do that completely today. So while it's important to legalize current operations that are taking place for all the good actors in the ecosystem, and there are certain elements that can be simplified for sure, especially when it comes to training, when it comes to the way airspace segregation has been considered. I think there are certain elements out there that can be worked on and simplified even for current operations to make it extremely easy for the good actors to participate. And that's critical. That's actually the need of the hour. That's the burning issue that the ecosystem is facing. But in addition to that, I think it's important that it lays the right hooks tomorrow for BVLOS operations, for layering on UTM systems and all of those that need to come, drone ports, etc. And creates a right institutional setup. I think the ad hoc nature of publishing rules kind of creates a lack of certainty within ecosystems. And I think it's important that certain elements of the institutional structure around this also go on to be fixed, so that there is the right set of anchors pushing this through over the long term in a more proactive manner. And I think if that happens, then a lot of the learnings can feed into a next iteration and a next iteration. So that's broadly my view on where things are at.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe if you have questions on what you saw to Biswajit and Sid about policy side, maybe now is the time. If you can please unmute yourself one at a time and slowly, just now is the time. We'll leave some time for just Q&A. And introduce yourself, please.
Or shall we look at the chats? I think there are some questions.
Yeah, so let me start with the chat while the other people think about it. So let's see. Airspace-based permanent state answered this. Okay, so GS Sumog asks, said for you, can this be used for other Ardupilot-based autopilot other than Pixhawk Cube?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself. The answer is sort of yes, but it does require like a special controller that is being used inside the Cube Orange specifically, not any Cube. So the Cube Orange has this 757 chip, which has security some security features that might not be available on all the hardware that is out there. So you need to ensure that particular security feature is available. I think the hashing tool I'm using, it could be done in software, but requires software change accordingly. And making it work on different hardware would require software change. So as it stands now, the answer is, as far as I know, it only works on CubeOrange, but the software can be modified to work with other hardware.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is NPNT code of the part of the official Ardupilot repo? The answer is yes. I guess the follow-up question.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
the follow-up question
it will
is,
be.
won't it affect Ardupilot firmware updates? That's how would you answer that one?
So basically what we are probably going to have a separate firmware channel or something like that. A lot of it depends on the policy as well. As I said, I mean, there is another question down the line is the cube required to have a trusted, is it going to be trusted execution environment or something like that? I mean, the answer to both of these questions is, if it is a TEE, you need to compile the firmware on your end. Basically, the manufacturer needs to compile their own software. And I do believe that is not a right way to go, in that it sort of locks not just for the good players, also for the bad players. So it has negatives as well. I mean, you are allowing people to just lock their stuff and hinder the investigation. I mean, I don't think that would be needed. And we'll see what happens as the policy proceeds. I think our government is already realizing that liberalization is a better path. So maybe there is some loosening from there. If it is not, we do have a software. I actually had until 1 week ago, the implementation did support the open implementation that I had shared did support the securing of the firmware and the bootloader on board on hardware, and allowed you to build your firmwares with the proper security features. But I sort of have disabled or removed it from there until there is a specific policy which says you are required to have this. And I don't believe I'm going to have this in Ardupilot, get this in Ardupilot master, because this is a thing that can be used for negatives as well as much as the positives. So it needs to be bit sensitive basically. So I'm going to wait for the policy decisions on that. And if it is basically not required, you should be able to say, from Mission Planner, select checkmark the Digital Sky and be able to download Digital Sky firmware from the Ardupilot project itself in the future. I believe that would be the case. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
And also, I would also like to find another. So Ardupilot will soon have this feature as well, where you can like a build server where you can select features you want, and it will do the build for you. So you can also imagine a scenario in the future where you have this Digital Sky as just a check mark, and it will give you the build firmware with the features enabled, so you don't have to do it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So one question is Aerobridge free or paid? And the answer is that it is free. You can use it for your own operation. There is only one clause that is important and useful for you. It is called the Amazon clause. If you look at it, basically what it says is that you cannot host Aerobridge and sell it to other people. So Aerobridge is meant for manufacturers and so on. So if you're using it in your own company for your own thing, you can do it without any issues or problems. Sometimes what people have said to me is that they want me, as in Open Skies, the company behind Aerobridge, to host it for them. Basically, this is like a hosting agreement. The one thing that you should understand is that when you get into the management server side, you have to be a little bit conscious of the security, because the management server holds the public and the private keys and so on. And it is not a impossible problem. People do that routinely, but just you have to be a little bit careful when you do this. When everything is on your computer, yeah, it's okay. Like you can manage, but when you start getting into the security side of things, public and private keys, if something is compromised, and so on. So there is a little bit of, let's say, hosting skills required. But the idea is that if you know all of this, then you can obviously use it. Use it as you want, and it's all open source, so you can take a look at the code and see how the digital sky parts are implemented and so on. The question about link to the session, it will be on YouTube. I will send it to you if you have signed up to the webinar, but it will be on the Slack channel and so on. Then Sonu, his question is, are the operations in the Pixhawk cube or some other FC flight controller happening under the TEE environment?
Yeah, I think I already explained that part, right? So the current implementation that is public, it does not have that feature. I removed it a week ago because of the reason I already explained. Because it cuts both ways, basically, for the good actors and the bad actors. So I'm just going to leave it until there's a policy clarification on that. Yeah.
Correct. Then Shekhar Borse asks, does it require a 4G module, ADSB, companion computer, etc.?
The answer is no. You don't require, if you have the permission artifact already downloaded before you go for a flight, I think inside the GCS, there is no requirement, at least from the RFM side, to have any connectivity. In fact, you should not be connecting your RFM to internet anyways. Not that there is a way you can, but still. Yeah, for the GCS, you might require it at some point, probably not before the flight though.
Yeah.
And you will require it when you are uploading logs, of course, but that can also again happen outside of time sync. You don't need to do it at the spot, you just need to store it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the same question that Suraj asked. Does the flight controller need internet connectivity or will it be through the GCS? It will be either, but GCS most likely. Mission Planner is what we're focusing on at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, which is another 4G, free.
So these modules will be required when we go to the identification part of the drone, where we want to do remote ID, where we can have like multiple types of module, not just 4G, can have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, for the remote identification bit of the solution. I believe Europe and US already have best policies on that, and I think India is also coming up with the policy on the same side. And it is going to be again part of our pilot development as well. We are already making some test beds for this kind of development and testing. So
give a summary or idea of key pair rotation between UAVs and the management server. Basically, there is an API for storing credentials. And what we are saying is once you rotate it, then you store it on the management server. Frankly, this is why this concept of a management server is crucial, because once you start rotating keys and you do it without a management server, you are just in file management and on your desktop and so on. But basically there is an API call, and then the idea is that every time a key is changed, either manually or directly via the GCS or something like that, then you just make a copy of it and send that to the management server. You can take a look at it. If you come on Slack, Sonu, I'll send you that endpoint. You can take a look at it. Any other questions? Please unmute yourself.
Hey, sir, Mayank here. I just had a question. I guess great demos, by the way. Really ties everything together. I had a question regarding the other aspects which were earlier required, like signing of the firmware upgrades or like the parameter upgrades. It seemed like there was a lot of very fine-grained points which were raised by, say, QCI for the NPNT compliance. Are we waiting for 15th August for clarifications before we kind of decide how to move on that? Or do you think some of those are already covered in the latest things you've pushed in the PR?
Before Sid answers that, Mayank is a very active member of the community. And Mayank, if you can please introduce yourself briefly as well for the others.
software engineer who doing firmware and robotics at Viman Robotics based out of Bangalore and Santa Clara. And I'm interested in drones, and this looked like the perfect place to kind of build a small piece of the important infrastructure to enable drone operations in India. So I got interested and involved in this community, and I've been helping out with grabbing screenshots of webinars and policy upgrades that I get from other channels so far, but I hope to get more involved with testing and contributing code soon.
Cool, Sid.
So the answer is yes. Yeah. So the answer is yes. I'm waiting for the policy decisions on the features. I think, as I said before, like I have it, I would say 90% of the implementations done. Parameter locking is also was also very close before I realized the negative side of this. But if policy does state that this is required, I mean, I'm sure I'm not going to, I'm going to implement it for RD pilot because someone has got to. So yeah, so that is going to be the case. I'm just waiting for the policy on this from the yeah. So that's the answer to your question, basically. Yeah.
Cool. And an unrelated question I have is like, so like you mentioned, 2 or 3 of the places where people can contribute, especially as a part of your work, is going to be either documentation bugs or helping with the CI aspect. So are there any resources you could share, like maybe on Slack itself, about how to write CI test cases for RD Pilot modules, or like where people could get started who are new to, say, even RD Pilot itself?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. First thing would be to to document what I just had demoed today inside
Sure.
the PR itself. And as far as the contributing to the RD pilot test cases and all those kind of part, we do have a documentation in the RD pilot project for the RD pilot project itself on how to write SQL tests and how to work with SQL auto test, basically. It's Python scripts for all of these things that you need to use, basically. But yeah, I'll brief it basically on how to do these kind of things. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Yeah, Rishi, I'll just take a window. I can see group captain RK Naran sir to be there in the participant. Like if he can unmute and if he can share his thoughts regarding how did he like the Aerobridge initiative, and like it will be great, sir. If you can kindly share us your thoughts.
Yeah, please introduce yourself as well, Narang sir, if for others and myself as well.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, he couldn't unmute it. I think so. He's not there. I could see him in the participant section. Okay, yeah, you can go ahead. I thought he will be there. Yeah.
I asked him to unmute, but yeah, maybe he's away. Any other questions?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Sonu has another question. If the UA is flying and did a land operation, but didn't disarm the motors after landing and again perform a takeoff operation.
Yeah, it will be a single, it will be a single flight, and it should be a single flight, because disarming is the thing that stops the flight. If you haven't disarmed, it will be considered the same flight, basically.
Perfect.
Yeah. Basically, arming is the situation where the permission artifact is actually loaded into the flight, right? So you want the permission, you want a point where the permission artifact, a new permission artifact, is loaded into the flight software, right? And that arming is the procedure that tells us that, basically. So yeah, it's tied to the arming, disarming, but we can change that moving forward if there's a real requirement. I mean, I know some planes actually don't have a concept of arming, disarming, but yeah, we can look into that in the future. We do have in our pilot, we do have a state called landed. We can use that probably, but for now it's just arming, disarming based. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, if there is no other question, then I'm going to just wait for a few minutes and then we conclude and just stop. The recording is available on chat. As I said, this is our second webinar, so we hope to do this. I won't want to promise very regularly, but let's say one more in 2021 maybe, or early 2022. As you can see, things move very, very fast in this space. So the only way to sort of get involved is to join the Slack channel and so on. And from my point of view, I'll leave the last words to Vibhu, but my point of view is just a huge thank you to the community. Mayank, Kapil, there are many people who I don't even sort of remember, but they are with us every week, sort of giving their time. Akshit, many. Sid Venkat is here, like he was involved earlier, and so on. So there are many people in this. Sid and I are just the face of the community, but I think that from my point of view, a lot of this is possible because of contributions of all the people who give their time and energy. So thank you for that. Maybe one of the ideas that we're discussing is in the future, instead of Sid and me doing it, we'll enable some of the community leadership to do it as well. So my urge you to join it. It's a technical community. It's fun. It's interesting, solving really hard problems, engineering problems, and in many ways, our aspiration is to be like a world-class community like ArduPilot and others. So just please join. If you have friends who are interested in drones, we have professors and all sorts of people in there who are very, very clever and can answer most of your questions. Okay, last words, Vibhu, and then we conclude.
No, I think we're good. I'd also like to thank you, Rishi, and especially Siddharth, also, who have been, great help. People like you, you are the real enablers of the industry, who contribute to open source. And I'm an open source enthusiast, although I couldn't contribute much on terms of code, but yeah, I love giving it back to the community in any ways possible. So thanks to you as well for organizing this and building this for everyone, so that manufacturers and everyone can benefit out of it. Yep. Thank you.
All right, with that we conclude. Thanks everyone, and see you at the next webinar. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.